Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee's APSASode. My name is Erica Newman. I'm the chair of the committee, and we are really excited. We have a full session packed with lots of learning and sharing of ideas around diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's been a tough year. The tragic murders of George Floyd in Minneapolis and Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia really highlighted the ongoing racial injustices that profoundly impact our communities and the children we serve. The unrest and national demonstrations occurring in the midst of a global pandemic have left us sad, angry, and uncertain, and fueled an urgency to really act now. Racism and violence directed against Black and Brown people, or indeed any member of our society, impacts us all. The structural violence that disproportionately affects people of color and those living below the poverty line has become a public health crisis, and it is our responsibility as physicians and surgeons for children to address and engage in these complex societal issues. We now have an unprecedented opportunity to deeply examine how we individually and as an organization can and will respond. APSA asserts that the complex missions of our organization and of our field is really best served by an active and engaged membership that is rich in identity diversity, cognitive repertoires, and socioeconomic and cultural backgrounds that are diverse. This is our mission statement: diversity, equity, and inclusion are core values for APSA that drive excellence and innovation in clinical care, research, education, advocacy, and leadership. We commit to broadening organizational diversity across cultural demographics, cognitive and practice style domains. Our environment will advance pediatric surgeons to attain their greatest potential, work in partnership to eliminate health inequities, and provide the highest quality of pediatric surgical care for all. You'll learn more, but we've been working really hard to share the things that we're learning and to share our messaging with the membership in the form of several white papers that have been published and are in public and in press in the Journal of Pediatric Surgery. This slide is so impressive because these are action items. And so if you see the words in bold, says APSA acknowledges and APSA recognizes and APSA supports and urges. And so these are action items that our organization has committed to supporting and uplifting for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I won't read through all of these, but if you have time to read the paper, you'll understand and really have insight into our mission and our values. This is our committee membership from 2018 to 2021. These were the inaugural members of the committee. This was and is a working committee. People on this committee have devoted their time and energy and their talent to really solidifying DEI as a mission and in the foundation of APSA. And so we are just so thankful for our team. And it's been just such, a highlight of certainly many of our, months we meet and, we've been just getting the work done. So now I will turn it over to my co-chair, Dr. Cynthia Ray Farrell, who will give you a preview of what's to come for our session tonight.
Thank you for the introduction, Dr. Newman. So during this DEI APSASode, you will learn about the work that has been done in the DEI subcommittees. And these committees evolve around education, community engagement, lowering bias and consciousness raising, and empowerment in government. It would then be followed by the inaugural presentation of the DEI Denzler Award. Abstract presentations involving DEI content and discussions would then follow. And then the final and most important segment of our APSASode evolves around tools to expand diversity within the pediatric surgery pipeline. Our first presenter of our subgroups will be Dr. Zachary Morrison.
Thanks, Dr. Reyes. The Education Working Group has two primary objectives. Our first goal is to educate ourselves and other APSA stakeholders on diversity, equity, and inclusion topics. We then apply this knowledge to the field of pediatric surgery. APSA stakeholders include APSA members, the APSA Board of Governors, our patients, and their families. Our second task is to oversee the creation of educational content for these groups. In the past, this content has taken the form of peer-reviewed journal publications, training sessions, and presentations at the APSA annual conference. We've had a very productive last couple of years. The APSA DEI strategic paper was published in the Journal of Pediatric Surgery in December of 2020. This paper was written by the DEI committee members with input and approval from the APSA Board of Governors. A paper discussing the role implicit bias plays in pediatric surgery is currently undergoing revision for possible publication in JPS. Additionally, we have at least 2 papers in the final stages of drafting, one on social determinants of health and the other on expanding the pediatric surgery pipeline. Our committee has submitted articles of interest to the Literature Review Committee's monthly emails on a quarterly basis since last July. We played a key part in organizing this APSASode, and we are currently working on drafting content for the PedSurg Library and PedSurg Not a Textbook websites, as well as CME questions.
Dr. Hannah Alamayo will then present the Community Engagement Working Group.
Thank you so much, Dr. Reyes. The Community Engagement Working Group has really focused on engaging the APSA community as well as the wider community of patients and parents. And we've sought to determine ways that our organization and our members can have a community impact on the social determinants of healthcare outcomes, and also ways that our community and our members can have an impact on the work we do for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so in the past year, we've had several outcomes from this. We've participated with the Education Working Group in terms of the paper on social determinants of health within pediatric surgery, which has been submitted for publication. We've participated in the Impacting Hope Symposium, both in 2020 and in 2021, which is an excellent example of a way to bring together diverse fields and diverse expertise as a think tank and sort of an experiential way of figuring out how we can all participate in impacting the social determinants of healthcare. The thing that we're most excited about with this Community Engagement Working Group is that we have been working very hard over the past year to create a diversity, equity, and inclusion toolkit, which includes practical tools for all stakeholders. So whether you're trying to figure out what you can do as an individual pediatric surgeon to work on diversity, equity, and inclusion, or whether you're part of an academic practice or a private practice, whether you're the CEO of a hospital or a department chair, they are reliable and very practical tools within this toolkit that you can use to impact this work. And we're very excited to be sharing that with you all shortly.
Dr. Catherine Martin will present the work done by the Lowering Bias and Consciousness Raising Working Group.
Consciousness raising is a form of activism popularized in the 1960s. It seeks to make change by raising people's awareness and understanding of social and political issues. The primary objective of the Lowering Bias and Consciousness Raising Working Group is to focus the attention of APSA's membership on the manifestations and adverse effects of bias on surgeons, trainees, and patients to affect both individual and organizational change. In addition to collaborations with the Education and Community Engagement Working Group, the Lowering Bias Working Group is holding quarterly training sessions for the APSA Board of Governors on bias and its effects. All training sessions will be turned into webinars available to the general membership through both PedSurgery TV and APSA's YouTube channel.
Dr. Kanika Bowen-Jallow will present the work done by the Empowerment and Governance Working Group.
It has been an honor to head up the Empowerment and Governance Working Group of the DEI Committee for the past 2 years. The Empowerment and Governance Working Group is tasked with all things involving the DEI APSA survey. This survey was circulated to APSA members at the beginning of 2021. The survey was created to provide a quantitative analysis of the socio-demographic composition and attitudes towards DEI within APSA. In addition, our working group also reviewed current APSA policies to identify potential gaps in DEI. We also established the development of an award recognizing a DEI trailblazer. As mentioned, the APSA DEI survey was distributed at the beginning of this year. We will now start the work of performing statistical analysis and subsequent manuscript preparation. Our group reviewed all APSA policies, guidelines, procedures, and missions, approximately 100 pages, and then made recommendations for changes with implementation of DEI objectives where appropriate. We were very proud of creating the guidelines for the James F. Denzler Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Award. The purpose of this award is to acknowledge an individual who has a consistent track record of promoting diversity and inclusivity in pediatric surgery. This includes delivery of care to diverse populations, working in diverse teams, and promoting diversity and inclusivity in the pediatric surgery professional community. We reviewed all applications and made recommendations to the APSA Board of Governors. Without further ado, I would like to introduce the inaugural James F. Denzler Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Award.
I'm Tony Stallion, and we have with us another fellow APSA member, Kanika Bowen-Jallow, and we have the distinct pleasure and opportunity to be able to interview Dr. James F. Denzler. Dr. Denzler is a fellow of the American Academy of Pediatrics, as well as a fellow of the American College of Surgeons. He's a professor of surgery at Morehouse School of Medicine. He received his BS degree in biology from Savannah State College and his medical degree from the Meharry Medical College in Nashville. Dr. Denzler was the first African-American pediatric surgeon to practice in the U.S. in 1969 and the first African-American to be accepted into the surgical section of the American Academy of Pediatrics in 1971. And he was the second African-American to be certified in pediatric surgery in 1976. He was the first African-American to serve on the Hospital Authority of Fulton County. Dr. Denzler is a pioneer in American surgery and in American pediatric surgery. Dr. Denzler, welcome, and thank you for joining us. So we'll start off, Dr. Denzler, with the opportunity to share with us your story and how you came to decide to go into medicine.
I'm from Savannah, Georgia. I was born in 1932. And I had several role models there. I was in the Boy Scouts. I was in the church. We had outstanding deacons. And we had outstanding physicians in the town. And the local doctors all gave me inspiration to go on and get in medical school.
You came along during the civil rights movement. How did that affect your training and how did people respond to you?
When I got into the New York for pediatric surgery, housing was a major problem. 26 interns and there was 2 black interns. We had to get together and try to find a place to live. And this place was right across the street from us. So our colleagues, white colleagues, were renting and we couldn't get in there. Washington called the hospital and told them to try to help these 2 black guys find a place to stay. So we found a place that's pretty close to the hospital and it was a nice place. It was just 2 of us, 2 blacks out of 26, and we looked out for each other.
What gives you hope today when evaluating the social and political landscape that we're facing?
We've faced good things in the past. We have to remember what Martin Luther King said about that moral arc. It's bending slowly towards justice. Now, that doesn't mean we don't have to get in there sometime and do things to help it move faster. We as physicians have, especially in the black community, have to be leaders. We have to get on these legislative boards in the state. So you see a black physician in the South, especially in the South, is not only a physician, but he's a politician, he's a leader.
Dr. Denzler, so you've obviously had an outstanding career and you've changed the lives of so many children and brought access to quality pediatric surgery care, especially to the minority community there in Atlanta. What words do you have for your fellow APSA members?
Treat everybody kindly, properly, and make them understand that you care about them, regardless of their ability to pay or their social strata. Make those children feel happy. Tell them they can do anything. And that's true. I can just point to so many kids who came by the office and mama said, can they come over here and just see what you do? I said, sure. And they come, and before you know it, I'm writing a letter for them to go to college. The next thing I know, I'm writing a letter for them to go to a medical school, or graduate school. So I want to be known as Dr. D, the fun doctor.
Dr. Denzler, you know, you've done a lot of firsts. Obviously, and blazed a trail. You are one of the giants that we stand on your shoulders. And so thank you so much.
To my colleagues in APSA, this is a very special day for me as president. I am here today to announce the Dr. James Denzler Award and to introduce Dr. Denzler again to the membership and also to introduce the recipient of the award. And what gives me a great sense of pride is that this is a day that I get to recognize two individuals who have been a great source of both inspiration as well as admiration for me, but maybe even more importantly, a great source of aspiration for me as a pediatric surgeon. And I'm sure that many of you will share in this. We have the good fortune to have the two of them here today. And so I'd like to give a bit of a preamble to this award. As you know, in the fall of 2019, following the induction of Dr. James Denzler, the first African-American pediatric surgeon, following his induction into the American Pediatric Surgery Association at the 50th anniversary annual meeting in Boston, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee of APSA, working under the auspices of the Board of Governors, established the Dr. James Denzler Award to honor the contributions that Dr. Denzler made to both pediatric surgery, to the education of surgeons, and to health equity. The specified purpose of this award is to acknowledge an individual who has had a consistent track record of promoting diversity and inclusivity in pediatric surgery. This includes the delivery of care to diverse populations, working in diverse teams, and promoting diversity and inclusivity in the pediatric surgery professional community. The award was approved by you, the membership, at the 2020 business meeting, and the process of developing and vetting a member in good standing engaged in the practice of pediatric surgery who shows dedication to diversity and inclusion in the workplace, as well as who has been dedicated to improving the lives of disadvantaged populations. This award was developed based upon this foundation. I would like to refer you to the APSA website to look at the timeline for nomination, for the nomination process, and for nominations to be submitted. The recipient of the award, the recipient today, will receive a $1,000 honorarium, and a $500 contribution will be made to the APSA-approved charity of the individual's choice. So without further ado, it is with great honor and pride that I present the inaugural Dr. James Denzler Award to Dr. Victor Garcia. Dr. Garcia was nominated by Dr. Maury Ziegler, who has known and worked with Dr. Garcia nearly 50 years, dating back to fellowship training at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. Dr. Garcia is the 1968 West Point graduate who received his BS in engineering and went on to serve his country in active military duty as an elite ranger. Following that 2-year period of service, he attended medical school at the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine, and he pursued residency training at Walter Reed Army Hospital. He did fellowship training in pediatric surgery at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. That's where he trained under Dr. Maury Ziegler, and the rest is history. He returned to the military to serve in a variety of roles as a surgical educator, as a surgical nutritionist, and a pediatric surgeon, but was then recruited in 1989 to Children's Hospital Medical Center in Cincinnati. Dr. Garcia established the storied Level 1 Trauma Center in Cincinnati and championed the needs of children, not just in injury prevention, but in the realms of nutrition, obesity, and self-actualization. He has been a major force in the recognition that violence is a public health issue for children and young people in Cincinnati, as well as nationally. He has been widely recognized for his community service and humanitarian spirit. As the recipient of the Martin Luther King Humanitarian Award twice, the local and national Jefferson Award for Public Service, and the National Diversity Council Multicultural Leadership Award, among many of his distinctions. He was also awarded the Distinguished West Point Graduate. And I must say, to top all of this, to be recognized in your hometown as a great living Cincinnatian, he received this award from the Chamber of Commerce in 2017. Dr. Ziegler highlighted in his letter that among his many great accomplishments and traits, his profound success has likely been attributed to his unwavering commitment to continued personal learning, especially as a student, on how to be a more effective leader and communicator. He was described by Dr. Ziegler as the consummate team player, and I would describe him as the consummate team player and the consummate leader, recognizing that the best leaders are the best team players. So without further ado, or without further awards, I would like to present to Dr. Garcia this recognition. And after he makes his comments, I would be remiss if I didn't ask Dr. Denzler to say a few words about the recipient. Dr. Garcia.
Thank you, Dr. Barksdale and Dr. Denzler. A singular pleasure to meet you. Your storied past is an inspiration to all of us. And certainly, as Dr. Barksdale has mentioned, reason for all of us to aspire to be close to you in what you've accomplished, the individuals that you have influenced over the decades that you have been practicing medicine. I accept this award with humility and yes, some trepidation. I will tell you that this then continues to motivate me to continue the work that I'm doing as we try to go from, well, for many of us, from slavery to freedom. The fact of the matter is that despite the optimism of the times, that children of color have virtually made no advancement, particularly those who actually were born and raised in the civil rights era. And that plight is something that haunts me and continues to motivate me in the work that I'm doing as I continue my work in pediatric surgery. You know, it was Rudolf Virchow that said that medicine is a social science. And that we have to take all avenues open to us to identify ourselves with those who are underprivileged. And it's easy to provide wonderful care for those who are privileged, but it's just more challenging, I think, for those who are underprivileged. We find ourselves, I think, sort of being persuaded by our biases as to, gee, if I made it, certainly they could have. And they would not be in the plight that they're in were it not for their own lack of ingenuity. What I've come to appreciate in walking and working with the poor and the marginalized, not just people of color, but of all ethnicities, that it is less about who they are and what they desire to do, and more about where they live and where they're constrained to live, work, and play. This award is, again, an acknowledgement of the fact that there are always first. Dr. Denzler has distinguished himself as being the first in many, many realms. It is my hope that others will appreciate that there's an absolute need that we be the first to sort of look at what has happened to people who perhaps are suffering disproportionately as a result of living and dying in the most extreme of circumstances. And what we can do, not just in the hospital setting, but actually in the sphere of the political as well as the legal. It is our responsibility that we cannot abrogate, particularly as surgeons committed to the surgical care and healing of children. And it's something that some may think is unreasonable, but there's nothing more, I think, constant about the history of mankind than those of us who deem what is impossible to achieve the possible. We've done that with technology. We've done that with the history of pediatric surgery, and I'm here to suggest that we can do that as we look at the disparities that we see increasing among segments of our population, particularly the children. So with that as an acknowledgement of this award, I want to thank Dr. Barksdale for his inspiration for me. I want to thank Dr. Ziegler for his nomination, but I also want to thank my colleagues here who are listening and looking at this for the work that they will embark on as a result of perhaps being inspired by Dr. Denzler, as I was listening to his remarks, to look upon those who are most disadvantaged and ask if not now, then when, and if not who, what about me? Stepping into the lane. This is our lane, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much.
Dr. Garcia, thank you for those profound remarks, deeply inspirational. Dr. Denzler, I would like to put you a bit on the spot to make a few brief remarks. I have had the great fortune over the last 20 years to kind of first get to know you and then get to really know you as I did last January of 2019 when I came to your home in Atlanta and spent that wonderful afternoon with you and Ms. Mabel, looking at your career, your insights, your folders and files of all the things that you've done, not only to train people and to take care of patients, but to impact the society. I would, if I might, ask you to make a few closing comments in this very important award. This is the inaugural Denzler Award. My pleasure. I yield any platform that I have to you.
First, I would like to thank the American Pediatric Surgical Association and its Board of Governors for selecting and naming this award after me. I was thinking about this. I've been around this space on the earth for 88 years, and I've practiced and been around in American pediatrics for about 50 years, and I've been called a fun doctor. I've never had anything named for me except a few traffic tickets. Now, I know that this is a very important moment for Dr. Garcia, and I'm so proud of him, and I wish to congratulate him. And I would like to think that him receiving this award is bending that moral arc that Martin Luther King talked about and bending it towards justice. And I want to thank him for his service, and I want to thank the American Pediatric Surgical Association for its service over the last 51 years. Thank you.
Dr. Denzler, thank you for those sage comments. And Dr. Garcia, thank you for your gracious receipt of this award. To the members of APSA, as your president-elect, I'm sure you recognize that as we honor Dr. Denzler and Dr. Garcia, we also honor ourselves and our commitments of as pediatric surgeons to not just save lives, but to save whole lifetimes. Again, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen in the audience and my colleagues around the world who may be watching, thank you for this opportunity and privilege to present these men to you today. Thank you.
In the next session, 4 abstracts will be presented. The initial discussants are Dr. Zachary Morrison from Marshfield Clinic in Wausau, Wisconsin, and Dr. Deborah Loth from the University of Chicago. Please post your questions in the chat box. Our DEI committee members and presenters are available for live discussions. We appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is William Wong. I am a surgery resident at Penn State Hershey Medical Center. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share our project looking at LGBTQ inclusivity of pediatric surgery clinics. We have no disclosures. A 2019 study showed that US primary care centers were missing data on gender identity for more than 65% of patients, with up to 1/3 of the missing information from the pediatric population. This is concerning given that a study revealed from 2015 to 2017, 9.5% of the United States youth ages 13 to 17 identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender. Our study set out to evaluate patient intake forms from pediatric surgery clinics across the United States and Canada to determine if LGBTQ+ inclusive questions were being integrated into initial patient assessments. Overall, we hope this research promotes conversations around the importance of LGBTQ+ inclusivity in pediatric surgery clinics. We utilized both the APSA and the ERAS websites to identify all the North American pediatric surgery departments affiliated with pediatric surgery fellowships or general surgery residencies. These programs were contacted and a copy of their patient intake forms requested. Forms were assessed for LGBTQ+ inclusivity using a novel scoring system consisting of 6 criteria: preferred name, pronouns, preferred language, gender identity, sex assigned at birth, and LGBTQ inclusive guardianship. Institutions without intake forms were invited to comment on their use of LGBTQ+ inclusivity intake questions. 125 pediatric surgery departments were contacted over the course of the study. 59 programs responded to our query, 10 of which provided intake forms. Using our scoring system, the median score was 2 out of 6 points with a range of 1 to 4 points. LGBTQ inclusive guardianship was the most common question asked. No intake form asked for pronouns. Of the 49 institutions who were unable to provide forms, 30% did report asking LGBTQ inclusive questions during initial visits. When we analyzed the various comments provided by institutions, we came across several common themes. Anti-inclusivity themes included the notion that collecting LGBTQ inclusive information is offensive or inappropriate, that this information is not relevant to surgical practice, and that this information is only relevant to departments that are involved in managing LGBTQ+ issues. In contrast to these themes, some programs noted an interest in being more inclusive, but felt that there was no standard process for obtaining inclusive data. In conclusion, this is the first cross-sectional study to evaluate the LGBTQ+ inclusivity of pediatric surgery clinics. Based on the low scores of inclusivity in the intake forms we received and the comments questioning the appropriateness and necessity of LGBTQ questions, we highlight the need for more LGBTQ plus education and inclusive care. Normalizing these discussions not only allows patients and families who identify as LGBTQ to feel accepted, it shows younger generations and their caregivers that LGBTQ plus inclusive disclosures are socially accepted and that their providers embrace their true identities. This project was the first step in standardizing a protocol to ask LGBTQ inclusive questions at our institution. Here is a screenshot of the demographic section of our new pediatric health assessment form, which contains LGBTQ inclusive terminology and scores 6 out of 6 on our inclusivity scale. If you're interested in a copy of our form, please feel free to contact me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for Dr. Wong for that interesting presentation that certainly brings to light what many people would consider to be glaring vacancies or absences from many pediatric surgery clinics. To discuss this abstract, my name is Zach Morrison, and I'm here with Dr. Loth, and we have a few questions for you. Firstly, what would you say to critics who question the importance of LGBTQ information to pediatric surgical care?
Right. So while I do agree with the sentiment that a large majority of the population that we will see in pediatric surgery clinic are coming in not necessarily for a disease or illness related to gender, it is our social responsibility as physicians, as pediatric surgeons, to provide a welcoming message to all populations, including the LGBTQ community. And a simple and effective way to do it would be to have an LGBTQ inclusive intake form. And so this is one of the first steps of providing a way to create an open conversation, not just for families and patients, but also for staff and other surgeons and medical students. And there is lack of LGBTQ data, not just for the adult population, but also for the pediatric population. So this is an opportunity to collect this data in hopes of creating or doing more quality of care research in the future.
And as your department moves towards collecting this potentially sensitive information, do you plan to share it with providers outside of your department? If so, how and with whom?
Yes. So when it comes to sensitive patient information like gender identity and sexual orientation, this will be disseminated, or this will be accessible to other providers within our institution because we do have electronic health records, and other providers would be able to access it. And I would like to think that everyone who has access to patients' records are HIPAA compliant. Now, certainly, we have to be aware that our patients may not want their guardians to know about certain information. So that's something that we can easily put somewhere in the health records to let our providers know.
Thanks. And how can this information be altered over time as a patient's status or preferences may change with growth, development, medical or surgical intervention, and especially in cases of patients with disorders of sexual differentiation?
Right. So our current standardized intake form that includes the LGBT inclusive terminology, it's currently in written form. And as of right now, we've disseminated over the past few months, and it's pretty well received amongst staff, family, and other surgeons in the clinic. But I can see this form being implemented in the electronic health records. For example, Epic has a section where you can put down a patient's preferred pronoun. And our current electronic health record system does not have something like that, but including all the 6 criteria that I mentioned in my presentation can be something that we can implement electronically.
Great. Thank you very much, Dr. Wong.
Hi, everyone. The topic I'm going to talk about is contribution of unequal new patient referrals to female surgeon underemployment. I want to begin by introducing the concept of underemployment. Underemployment happens when a person wants to work full-time but can only find a part-time job, or when a person's current job does not match his or her education, training, or experience. Although it is impossible to imagine surgeons to be unemployed, it is actually possible for surgeons to be underemployed. Underemployment is a serious societal issue and is tracked by the Federal Reserve Bank. In surgery, female surgeons are more likely to be underemployed. For example, compared to male surgeons, female surgeons have a lower operative volume and less complex cases and have fewer subspecialized cases. The primary metric of a surgeon's clinical productivity can be expressed by operative volume, and it can be affected by several factors, including surgeon personal choice, surgeon personality, the relationship between surgeon and referring physician, or the referring pattern of the referring physician. If we use a function to express operative volume, it is total new patient referrals times operative rate. Total new patient referral is a special metric that is unlikely to be controlled by the surgeon themselves. Therefore, we chose total new patient referral as our primary outcome. Our hypothesis was that female surgeons have fewer total new patient referrals than male surgeons. We used patient encounter data at a large medical center from 1997 to 2018. We included all new patient referrals to general surgeons. The primary endpoint was total new patient referrals. The secondary endpoint was operative rate. The primary independent variable was surgeon gender. We performed multivariate linear regression analysis and adjusted for surgeon race, years in practice, clinical subspecialty, and calendar year. Subset analysis were performed by calendar year before or after 2010. All analyses were performed in surgeon months to accommodate surgeon availability in different months. There were 121 surgeons across 12,000 surgeon months. Overall, surgeons had a median of 14 new patient referrals per month and a 51% operative rate. After adjusting for surgeon characteristics and calendar year, female surgeons saw 5 fewer patients per month than their male colleagues. Female surgeons had and male surgeons had similar operative rates. On the subset analysis, the differences of new patient referrals between male and female surgeons has not changed in the 20 years. In conclusions, female surgeons receive fewer new patient referrals than male surgeons. Surgeon gender may be one of the factors contributing to this differential referral pattern. The difference in number of referral patterns may contribute to female surgeon underemployment. Thank you for your time.
Hi, I'm Hira Ahmad. I'm one of the surgery fellows at Nationwide Children's Hospital.
And hi, I'm Tony Stallion. I'm the Chief of Pediatric Surgery at Beaumont Children's in Royal Oak, Michigan.
Thank you, Dr. Chen, for the excellent presentation. Our first question is, how do we move forward and improve referrals and all these disparities for female surgeons?
Thank you. That is a very good question. And I think it is really difficult for any individual try to overcome a systemic barrier. So we need a systemic level intervention. Within surgery, we can try to track the volume and the complexity of referrals first. Other potential interventions could include centralized referral system or sponsorship by the senior surgeons. And beyond surgery, I think we can do more research on investigating the cognitive errors underlying the referrals.
Thank you.
Well, Dr. Chen, thank you very much. It was a great presentation and a wonderful topic. And so some specific questions just about your method and how you looked at things. And What was the ethnic diversity of the surgeon studied, and explain the adjustment for race that, given that it may have been an important factor that cannot be clearly separated, the surgeon as a female and also being an ethnic minority?
Yeah, I think this is also very important. In our hospital, the over close to 80% are white surgeons. And in our studies, we did multivariate regression analysis. Therefore, we adjusted for surgeon characteristics such as race, gender, seniority, etc. So the gender effect we found was independent of the race effect. But of course, we understand that if a minority women surgeon would have the effect of minority and the effect of being a woman.
Right. Okay, well, thank you. It's been a wonderful presentation. We thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the discussion.
Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Sasha Williams, and I'll be presenting our work entitled The Impact of Race on Letters of Recommendation for the Pediatric Surgery Match. We have no disclosures. The process of obtaining a pediatric surgery fellowship position remains quite competitive. Strong letters of recommendation, or LOR, are essential components to a successful application. Recent studies in other specialties have reported gender bias in LOR to postgraduate training programs. The potential for this and other biases warrants continued investigation. The purpose of our study was to determine whether significant linguistic differences exist in LOR to pediatric surgery based on applicant race or ethnicity. We conducted a retrospective analysis of ERAS applications to a single ACGME accredited pediatric surgery fellowship program between the years of 2016 and 2020. Race was self-reported by applicants. LOR were analyzed via a linguistic inquiry and word count analysis software program, or LIWC. And this program looked at word count and the frequency of word occurrences from predetermined and custom dictionaries. Matching status was recorded, descriptive statistics and bivariate analysis were utilized, and significance was determined at p-values less than 0.05. 325 applications were analyzed, yielding 1,263 LOR. 51% of the total cohort and 55% of the non-Caucasian cohort were female. The pie chart on the top right of the slide illustrate that the majority of applicants were Caucasian at 65%, followed by other, Asian American, Hispanic, Latinx, and African American. Returning to the table on the left, the majority of the LOR authors were male, professors, and pediatric surgeons. Although not a primary outcome of our study, match rates are illustrated on the bottom right of the slide. The overall match rate for the study cohort was 44%, and two of the study groups, the Asian American and African American match rates, exceeded the study mean. In terms of the LIWC results, the LOR for Asian Americans were more likely to include analytical, religion, and work terms. African American LOR were more likely to include social terms. Focus present and negative emotion terms were more commonly found in Caucasian LOR, and anger terms were most frequently found in Caucasian and Hispanic Latinx LOR. In terms of future areas of study, that would include a larger cohort, in particular looking at the race or ethnicity of LOR authors, in addition to investigating any potential associations between LOR terms and successful matching. Current national events have underscored the importance of diversity and inclusion. The results of our study have demonstrated significant linguistic differences in LOR to pediatric surgery based on applicant race or ethnicity. The impact of this on matching or matching differentials is uncertain, as the selection process can be quite complex. However, the differences reported may point to the existence of implicit bias or reinforce or basically point out the reinforcement or the persistence of social stereotypes. Here's our contact information. Thank you very much for your time.
Good afternoon. My name is Colin Martin. I'm a pediatric surgeon at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. It is my pleasure to serve as a co-discussant for this presentation. We all have biases, and certainly these biases can affect the letters of recommendation that we provide for our prospective applicants. Here, the authors used linguistic inquiry and word counting software to better understand these differences and bring to light how our biases can affect our support and possible match rates.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Martin. My name is Numa Perez. I'm a general surgery resident here in Boston. And thank you very much, Dr. Williams, for putting together this abstract. For those of us who are not familiar with the LIWC software, could you tell us a little bit more about how it works? And then maybe tell us if this software has been previously used or validated for studies like yours.
Thank you, Dr. Perez and Dr. Martin. It's my honor to be here. In terms of the LIWC software, basically consists of over 6,400 words or word fragments that reflect various parts of speech, thinking styles, and emotion. And the way it works basically is that not only does it count words, but it analyzes the frequency of words from pre-existing dictionaries. Examples of pre-existing dictionaries are words such as analytical, authentic, clout, grindstone, social, work, and so on. In terms of it being used elsewhere, the LIWC has definitely been used in a number of excellent studies in the literature. For example, French and colleagues in 2018 used the LIWC to look at gender and LOR for general surgery residency. And in 2019, Hoffman and colleagues also used this tool to look at gender and LOR for transplant surgery fellowship. And then most recently in 2021, we have reports in the literature from Go and colleagues who used the LIWC to look at gender and LOR for both vascular surgery residency and also OBGYN residency. And those are just a few examples.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Dr. Williams, for that great introduction. We were wondering if you were able to identify any similar associations between this linguistic content and successful matching.
Yes, these were very interesting findings. So it's important to basically underscore that correlation or associations don't necessarily mean causation. So, certainly it's important for there to be further research into the potential impact of LOR linguistic terms and differential matching.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And to our last question, do you and your co-authors have any advice for future letter of rec writers, as well as readers, that could potentially ameliorate some of these differences in content and tone that you identified in your abstract?
Thank you. This one is a bit of a challenge because implicit bias is so pervasive and so intangible. But in terms of my suggestions, I would suggest considering a standardized LOR, which is currently being used in a number of other subspecialties like emergency medicine, ENT, and plastics. And while it is imperfect, studies do suggest that it reduces bias. But in terms of our specific research, we're in the process of developing an objective tool that may both identify and predict implicit bias in LOR using AI or machine learning. So our hope is that, the development and implementation of these types of tools will help flag, differences in tone or content for both, authors and for readers in the future.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Williams, again, and your co-authors for working on this very important topic, and to APSA and Dr. Martin for the opportunity to moderate this discussion. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to present our work. We have no disclosures. Increasing emphasis has been placed on enhancing diversity, equity, and inclusion in medicine. This is in an effort to create a physician workforce reflective of the populations we serve and ensuring that those physicians feel they have a voice and thrive in the workplace. Pediatric surgery has committed to increasing DEI efforts, and a recently published review showed that in the last 40 years, pediatric surgery was white male dominant. However, it highlights graduating fellows are increasingly female. Thus, the purpose of our study was to contribute to this important body of work by examining current representation of gender and race amongst academic pediatric surgeons, and then comparing our percentages to US Census population data to evaluate if pediatric surgery is reflective of the patient populations that it serves. We did this by reviewing online rosters of academic pediatric surgery departments at accredited US medical schools, collecting data on gender, race, and leadership positions. We then looked at the 2019 US Census population data and represented our results as a representation of diversity in pediatric surgery and its relation to the US population along gender and race lines. Statistical methods are listed. We evaluated 674 faculty, 72% of which were male. The majority of the cohort was white at 75%, and African Americans were least commonly represented at 3%. Looking at academic rank, for women, as academic rank increased, their representation at each level decreased. Looking more granularly, they were the majority of assistant professors and in the minority of full professors, but they were equal to men at the associate professor level. Similarly, for the racial makeup of the cohort, academic rank follows those same lines, with the majority at each academic position being white, pediatric surgeons. We looked at 298 leadership positions, 77% of which were held by men. 0.1% of surgeon-in-chief positions were held by women, 14% of division chief, and 22% of program directors were held by women. However, looking at medical directors, like trauma program medical directors or fetal program directors, these positions were 62% female. So females were actually in the majority here. So looking at our percentages compared to US Census population data, males, white, and Asians were representative in pediatric surgery and the US population. For example, men are 49% of the US population, 72% of pediatric surgery faculty. Females, African Americans, and Hispanics, the opposite was true. So women are 58% of the US population, or 51%, I'm sorry, but only 28% of pediatric surgeons. Similarly, African Americans, 13% US population, but only 3% of the pediatric surgery faculty. Thus, in conclusion, men are more commonly pediatric surgeons. They're also more common to have higher academic rank and hold leadership positions. White pediatric surgeons are significantly more common than African American, Asian, and Hispanics. The minority groups also were associated with lower academic rank and fewer leadership positions. So our recommendations are to develop interventions aimed at increasing the diversity of practicing pediatric surgeons. We can do this by increasing mentorship of current and future pediatric surgeons and increasing sponsorship and promotion of females and minorities into leadership positions within pediatric surgery. Thank you, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Brittany, for this wonderful presentation. My first question is, how did you determine the ethnicity of the doctors in your paper?
So that was done mostly by pictures. A lot of the programs have pictures posted of their faculty, so we were actually able to use those to identify most. We stayed away from doing names just because it increases a bias for an association of certain names with certain groups, and it also doesn't represent individuals who may be married to within different ethnic groups. Because the PIs for this were also pediatric surgeons in cases where we weren't sure, we were actually to use each other for personal relationships to identifying some of the surgeons. I think it is a weakness that it's not officially done, and we may have underrepresented some groups because of that. But those were the methods that we used.
Thank you.
So and my first question has to do with the fact that women and minorities had less leadership roles, and how much of that is due to the fact that your paper and other papers have shown that they've entered the workforce later versus that there's a true discrepancy even when you reach the same distance from your training?
I think it's both. There is a large gap in terms of pediatric surgery catching up with increasingly introducing females and minorities into their workforce. Several decades worth of gap that is there. I will say that the minority and females, at least from what I've seen in collecting the data for this paper, appear to be catching up, especially at the associate professor level where males and females are equal. I do think that they're at a disadvantage just because you're coming in behind, and then you're also coming into systems where those biases may be there. So it is harder for you to reach the associate professor level as well as to get leadership opportunities. So I think we do have a combination of two problems.
So my next question, even when you're showing us a positive future, when we look at all areas, they all say if we wait for the natural time for equity to happen, it will take a long time. So what we as pediatric surgeons can do to decrease this time and reach equity faster?
Sponsorship and action is how I would answer that question. Sponsorship for all of the minorities and females, meeting with them and figuring out what their career goals are so that they can be placed in arenas to make those things happen. I think as well as official policies and statements are also very helpful to that. There is a recent statement out from the Diversity and Equity Committee from APSA. So I think the next step is to actually putting those initiatives into action and making sure that we make strides within the next 1 to 2 years instead of waiting 10 to 20 to do it. And I think that will help us move things along, move the needle a lot faster.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
I'm Sarah Mansfield, presenting on behalf of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee on improving representation in pediatric surgery. Why is diversity important? Well, there are many reasons, supported by the literature. We know from business, industry, and medicine that diverse teams perform better. A diverse background often results in unique thought processes and problem solving. In medicine, physicians from diverse backgrounds have been shown to provide more culturally competent care with improvement in physician and patient relationships and better outcomes. Additionally, physicians are often looked to as role models. A diverse workforce gives kids of all identities someone to look up to. Medicine has traditionally been a white, cisgendered, male-dominated career, and there has certainly been significant progress over the previous decades. This is a nice review from the group at UAB outlining the makeup of pediatric surgery graduates over the last 40 years. You can see in the 80s, only 16% of fellowship graduates were identified as female. This improved over the subsequent years, with the 2018 class nearly reaching parity with those identified as male. However, the racial makeup of graduating pediatric surgeons has been slower to improve. You can see the line for Black and Hispanic graduates remains relatively flat. However, the problem does not start at the fellowship level. The pipeline starts long before pediatric surgery applications. In order to improve the makeup of pediatric surgery, we need a more representative pool of applicants. This review from 2018 demonstrates some of the shortcomings. The Hispanic and Black population combined is about 30% of the US population. However, they only represent 10% of the medical students and surgery residents in the country. So why can't the medical community look more like the population we serve? We need to understand the many leaks in the pipeline that minority students face along the way. At every stage of education and training, we lose bright and promising students because of disadvantaged backgrounds. Often the situation, family, zip code to which you are born determines your fate before you ever get a fighting chance. Kids born in areas of educational poverty do not have the same resources as children born in award-winning school districts or that go to private schools. There is little to no exposure to STEM careers early on, and kids may not have socioeconomic stressors requiring immediate careers to support their family. If a student makes it to college, it may not be of the same prestige. Again, there's a large financial burden which is only compounded
by medical school prep courses and applications. In medical school, lack of mentors that understand the unique needs of underrepresented students to combat structural racism is often lacking. Students may be cautious about applying to competitive specialties due to perceived limitations in their applications. In residency, underrepresented minorities must still overcome microaggression with an alarming rate of dismissals for underrepresented minority residents. Only those who navigate these obstacles may apply for the most competitive fellowship in medicine. A common theme in the leaking pipeline is the lack of mentorship. We encourage institutions to take a very intentional approach to mentorship for our minority students and residents. This will often be a race discordant partnership, given the lower number of minority faculty that we previously discussed. It's important for mentors to educate themselves on the unique needs of their mentees. Institutional racism is a real problem for many Black and Hispanic students. And additionally, stereotype threats and imposter syndrome are frequent barriers to address. However, the benefits of these relationships go both ways, with the mentor often benefiting just as much as the mentee. The application for medical school, residency, and fellowship should also be reviewed in a holistic way. Last year at APSA, we sponsored a lecture on ways to mitigate and acknowledge everyday biases that we encourage admissions committees to review. The Pediatric Surgery Program Director Committee also reviewed strategies to balance the review of applications with life experiences rather than simply the number of publications or test scores. This was particularly well received from the Pediatric Surgery Fellowship Directors, and we encourage everyone to take these to their general surgery program directors and medical school admission committees. And finally, caution the value of the phone call, as this tends to favor applicants who are already part of the club. Now, there are a number of programs across the country that are doing great work to improve the pipeline at various stages. A few examples include the Merit Program in Baltimore, which provides a comprehensive mentorship program for high school students. This offers free Saturday college prep courses, professional internships, and guidance to college applications. You can see that the success rate of this program is outstanding, with 100% admissions rate to university programs. This program is done with the help of Johns Hopkins faculty, including surgeons, to expose kids to medicine early. The Georgetown Experimental Medical Studies Program, or GEMS program, encourages students from underrepresented backgrounds to take a rigorous curriculum comparable to that of a first-year medical student. With one-to-one tailored advising, students learn how to learn while gaining medical knowledge, critical thinking, and test-taking skills. And again, has had a wonderful success rate with over 500 students becoming physicians. The Nth Dimension is an example of a program designed to improve the exposure to subspecialty surgical programs for medical students. This is an orthopedic program to improve exposure specifically for women and underrepresented minorities. This provides a summer internship program, dedicated mentorship, and research opportunities. So in conclusion, underrepresented minorities face numerous barriers in the path to medicine and surgery. It takes a coordinated and dedicated approach to improve these barriers at all stages of education. In the end, we hope to make a medical community that is more representative of the populations we treat. So what can APSA do? I'll turn it over to Natalie and Whitney to discuss a new initiative.
Hi, my name is Whitney Fu. I'm a PGY3 in general surgery at the University of Michigan.
Hi, I'm Natalie Moreno. I just graduated from the University of Michigan, and I'm a PGY1 at Penn Surgery.
We'll be sharing our new pipeline program called the Association for Pediatric Surgeons Growing Advancing Representation, or APGAR for short, which we founded with Drs. Erica Newman, Samir Gadapalli, Grace Mock, and Eunice Wong. What motivated us to start our organization is the need for representation and the challenges that first generation and underrepresented learners who wish to pursue pediatric surgery experience during the application process. Just last year in the 2020 pediatric surgery fellowship application cycle, only 1.4% of applicants identified as Black and only 6.8% identified as Hispanic, Latino, or of Spanish origin. There were no applicants that identified as American Indian or Alaska Native. In general, there is a tendency to recruit in one's image, which puts underrepresented individuals at a strong disadvantage. This is compounded for trainees at programs without pediatric surgery fellowships and trainees at community programs. Why this matters is that the literature demonstrates that fellowships ranked personal prior knowledge of applicants, reputation of the residency program, letters of recommendation, and publications in the specialty to be among the most important factors for selecting candidates to interview. This suggests that a strong network is critical for one to apply successfully. With this knowledge in mind, we're developing targeted interventions to level the playing field.
So what is IPGAR and how does it relate to the current need? It's a community that fosters a longitudinal network among pediatric surgeons, residents, medical students, and high school students. The network is meant to provide a multi-tier mentorship model and tools while teaching mentees about the hidden curriculum, which refers to the nuanced knowledge transfer that is meant to occur in order for trainees to advance in their medical careers. Thus, to diversify pediatric surgery, APGAR will employ a multi-pronged approach. For one, we're developing a toolkit, including written materials and webinars to support mentees in a stage-relevant fashion. This will include, but is not limited to, interview support, application and personal statement guidelines, and medical school roadmaps. The second component is a national ambassador group, including residents, fellows, and attendings to serve as mentors. And this is meant to provide equitable access for trainees at programs that do not have associated pediatric surgery divisions. The third is outreach, and this is meant to target programs without associated fellowships. We will also establish APGAR chapters, both at academic and community programs across the country, with the idea that these will share knowledge and direct outreach interventions from their institutions to local high schools and medical schools. And lastly, we'll partner with the APSTPD to develop a DEI toolkit for fellowships to use in their recruitment process.
Our objectives are all meant to address what has been termed the leaky pipeline, which refers to the barriers that those underrepresented in medicine encounter as they advance. With both mentorship and the appropriate tools, it is our mission to close the gaps upstream, targeting these areas that Dr. Mansfield discussed in her presentation. As you can see here, our current members come from a myriad of institutions, mostly in the Midwest and the East Coast for now, but we're definitely looking to expand.
We invite you to join us as we close the gaps. Please reach out to Dr. Erica Newman at the email address provided, and we look forward to having you join the team.